Welcome to This Is Whole Life, a podcast from the Whole Life Church in Orlando, Florida.
Join me, Ken Wetmore, lead pastor, and Melanie Bachman, our worship pastor, along with our communication team, Randy and Lucas. Take a look back, a look deeper, and a peek into the week ahead.
Here we explore meaningful conversations about spirituality, community, and living with purpose.
We don't have all the answers, but we are walking the journey together.
Wherever you're listening from, you're wanted here.
This is Whole Life.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 533 of This Is Whole Life. Let me tell you something, guys. You did your job this week. We have questions and quite a few more questions. I think we are going to have to kind of squeeze them down so that they all fit, because a couple of them were in the same vein. So if you don't hear yours exactly, I think we're still going to get the overall theme of it. So
somebody wrote it better than you. That's what Randy's trying to say.
Wow,
Randy, I can't believe you'd say that. That's really not a nice thing to say to people who took the time to write to us.
That almost sounds hurtful.
It really does.
I'm sorry that was how that is. And because I really, the next thing I was going to say was, I'm just excited because the best part of our conversation is you listening and giving your feedback, whether you're listening online, as we did get an email this week. And so we know we have people listening.
Do you have a voicemail too?
No voicemail. But anyway, 407-965-1607. You can send a text or a voicemail. Voicemail gets extra credit per Ken every single time. And there's also the Slack channel. And there was nothing that this week. So we're going to start off Great Families. And I'm wondering why we named it Great Families. I hadn't really thought about it. And then I looked at it, was like, the first dysfunctional family. And I'm like, ooh, that's great families. It's families, but maybe not great.
Ken was trying to fit it into the theme.
Yeah.
Greater things, great families.
Oh, great families. So if your family stinks, it's still a great family. Is that what you're saying?
What Melanie's saying is that about 18 months ago to 2 years ago, when I planned this series, I didn't know I was going to do it on dysfunctional families.
He had high hopes.
Well, this week it was on dysfunctional families. And to hear the message that we're going to talk about today, you can go and swipe up in today's show notes.
But it really wasn't about dysfunctional families. It was about the fact that everybody has some kind of dysfunction in their family somewhere. And so how do we go ahead and create great families out of that?
He's saying dysfunction is normative.
He's saying dysfunctional is everywhere.
It's in a lot of places.
I think we're going to get to that in a little bit. But also, if you want to hear the message that this is based on so it makes more sense and you can hold Ken accountable for what he said and what you think he said, it's episode 326. Swipe up in today's show notes and look for the link for Speaking of Grace. It is the latest episode in that channel, and it's already there for you to hear. So go ahead.
How is it that we have 326 Speaking of Grace, but 500 of...
Well, the story is that when I joined the church and we went to new member orientation, they're like, oh, we heard that you know how to be able. You know how to be on Abel's team. You could be the director, the switcher, and all those things, because I did that for 13 years over at Forest Lake Church. And I was like, never going to happen. I want to sit with my family for church. I'm not going to do that. And they're like, you need to find a place to be involved. And I said, I've got a place to be involved, but it may not be something you're looking for. And I said, I am willing to do a podcast. And they're like, great. We'll get you the MP3 every week. And I'm like, I will not do that podcast. I will eventually, if you still want, but that's not a podcast. That's a sermon. And so it's not a podcast until you have a real podcast where people talk and interact and share ideas and things like that. And so I was in Andy's office and he's like, well, what would we have to do to make that happen? I said, all you have to do is show up for 20 minutes a week. And he's like, I don't have to prepare anything.
Wow, how times have changed.
Right. Well, it was 15. It was 15 with Andy, Randy, and
Greater
Jeff.
Times.
Yeah.
Dysfunctional family.
That's it. And speaking of dysfunctional family, and Andy's like, I don't have to do anything. I'm like, you've already prepared the message. That's it. That's all you got to do. And I'm going to ask some questions. We're going to take questions from other people, and we'll keep it short and sweet. And it's only every Tuesday. And he's like, but I don't have to do that. I can do that. And he literally, without missing a beat, Jeff's office, if you are familiar with the church office, they share a wall. And Andy looked at the wall and yelled through the wall. And the doors were open, and he's like, "Hey, Jeff, we're doing a podcast every week with Randy. Be here on Tuesday afternoons at 4:30. Jeff was like, "What?" And so then I went over and we talked it out, and we eventually did. And then the reason that we have Speaking of Grace is one of our long-standing church members here for a long time, Todd Chobatar.
Yeah.
If you know Todd, they transferred. I don't remember where they transferred to. If they moved for work or what. And about probably 6 months later, we were at Wekiva hiking in the state park, and Todd and I met on the trail, and he's like, "Randy, you got to do me a favor." He's like, "You still do the podcast at Florida Hospital Church, right?" I'm like, "I do." He's like, "We need Andy's sermons." He's like, "I am going into withdrawal symptoms with not having Andy in my life, and I don't have a chance to really watch it." And he's like, "It's not convenient for me to do it on a video watching like this old stream." He's like, "I need it just the podcast, like cut everything else and just give me the sermon." And then a couple more people approached me over the next 2 months, and I was like, "All right, we've done the other one long enough. It's time now." Because I think, I'm trying to think, we started your episodes, I think your first one was 276, 277, something like that.
That's so.
Something like that.
I know. I think I did. I think my first podcast when I was here interviewing, right?
I think, yeah, that sounds, I think you did.
I think that, I guess it really wasn't interviewing. I think it was, I'd been brought down here to be introduced, and I think it was written in pencil, but maybe not yet pen. But I met with the staff, and I remember, I think we recorded it down in 105.
It could have been. Oh, yeah. Oh, man, that's been a while. Could have been.
Yeah.
Could have been.
That's what I remember.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, that's how that started. And then when Ken came aboard, it was like, do you want to continue? And here
Same
we are.
pitch. It'll only be 20 minutes. You don't have to prepare. Well, one part of it's true.
Well, you do have to prepare. I mean, you don't have to prepare anything extra necessarily,
right?
Because you've already done the heavy lifting. You make it easy for us.
Yeah.
So without Ken or whoever it happens
I prefer to say,
preaching,
Randy, you make it easy for us.
So that's the heavy lifting.
Do it by myself without you here, it hasn't felt as easy.
Well, maybe it doesn't feel like work, but here we go. All right. We have an email, and you guys.
Hey, if you guys are like, well, why are you? It's lore. I mean, this is our 100-year anniversary. We have to be talking about lore, especially as we're moving into September.
Yeah.
Yep.
Lore the podcast or
lore? Lore.
Right.
Lore, yeah.
You never listened to Lore the podcast?
Lore of the podcast.
No, Lore of the podcast. It was, I mean, it isn't anymore, I'm sure, but it was, well, I shouldn't say no, but it was the most listened to podcast in the world for 3 or 4 years running. LORE. It's hosted by.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well,
okay. I was lost
forgot
for a
you were
second.
a podcast geek, and I had no idea where you
I
were
met
going
the creator
on that.
Anyway. It's a podcast movement, and
I'm so happy for you. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So this was before like Joe Rogan and.
Oh yeah. But his numbers. Joe Rogan's got nothing on what he did.
Okay.
He was a writer, wrote horror fiction, or I shouldn't say horror. He wrote on basically history and lore and things of that nature of people, that superstitions, like things that people that believe that, and a lot of it runs over into the spiritual world, but it's there's some history when you get the podcast. And his name is Aaron Mahnke. He's got one of those voices where you're just like, I could listen to this guy all day. And he's a perfectionist. He's not a particularly nice person, as I met in person, but that's my opinion. Maybe you've had a different idea of that. But anyway, yeah, his friends, he's like, man, you tell the best stories in written form. You should narrate these and make a podcast. So he did a group of like 4 of them. And I was like, fine, I'll put them up on Apple Podcasts and whatever. And immediately
took off.
He had like 25 million hits and like nothing. And in the first, I want to say in the first year, he had over 300 million listens, which is ridiculous for a podcast.
Where are we
What does that say about human beings? That is
the most interesting.
Well, the thing is, he can make something that you wouldn't normally listen to. And some of it's a little creepy, but a lot of it is just historical, where it's like, look, we know he did a whole thing on the witches.
Salem witch trial.
And like all the history that went behind it. And then here's these stories that pop up in in American lore, and it's part of your history because these are stories that have been told over the campfire and whatever. So there's this interesting part to it, and he never tells you in the end. At the end, his sign off is, "I'm Aaron Mahnke, and this is lore." So he lets you decide, like, do you believe it? Do you not believe it? Is this lore? Did it really happen? And he has a research team that does a great job of finding as much information as they can about it and try to present it in a way that's entertaining. And up until, I haven't listened for a while. Just because I moved on to other things, but like I didn't miss. I think it was probably the first 300 episodes. It's just it's engaging to say the least. I wouldn't recommend if you're not into
lore.
I mean, the history part of it to me is probably the most interesting, but if you're not into that, sometimes supernatural, he gets a little bit into that here and there too. So if that's something that you're not interested in, it'd probably be a good idea to not even go there. But anyway, one of the most well-produced podcasts ever in the history of podcasts. I will give him that much for sure.
Cool.
Anyway, speaking of, we have people that we've met. Hey, Whole Life Podcast crew. I really enjoyed Ken's message last Sabbath, and as someone who was adopted, I appreciate his acknowledgement of certain adoption-related issues. I know Ken has touched on the subject in earlier messages, but I'm really looking forward to the group discussion on the question of, according to the slide at the end of the service, how do I honor the fifth commandment with a parent who is toxic? Praying for y'all, Carolina Dave. So we know people too. Aaron, how about that? Yeah. So we have, do we want to start there and answer that question? How do I
feel like I talked about it at the end of the second service, didn't I?
Did he? Okay, maybe.
So I feel like, I mean, I'm not trying to get away from Carolina Dave, but what I'm saying is I think that, Melanie can start.
Yeah.
Wait, I didn't prepare the sermon, so
it's all right.
Yeah, what do you think, though?
Done your PhD
How
for
do I
15
honor
years
the fifth
or whatever
commandment?
it is. So.
Not on the subject of toxic parentage. However, okay, so
as a parent,
so here's the thing. I think that first of all, there needs to be, for your own sanity and health, there needs to be boundaries, and there also needs to be differentiation between yourself and your parent. I think a lot of times the toxicity can become entanglement. And I think you need to be able to separate yourself and your own identity and your own values from the parent. And I think that there is a trend right now to just cut parents out of your life if you disagree with something.
Yeah.
And call everything toxic. But and so I think that it's overused a lot, but I know that there are toxic parents out there, and sometimes you draw smaller boundaries, and sometimes you draw larger boundaries, and sometimes it does indeed mean that you have to separate yourself. But I don't think that honoring a parent means letting them do things that are toxic to you. I think that you can honor someone by creating boundaries for that person.
I was just going to say, wouldn't making boundaries that protect you, and in a way, I would say they protect the parent from some of the things that you probably would say or do if you weren't giving yourself those boundaries, because once your anger level gets to a certain level, or the work that it seems to be, it's heavy, it's hard, and it just feels like you got this weight on you in this situation, you're going to say and do things that you might mean, and maybe sometimes you may not mean, or you might be able to say them in a kinder, more productive way had you had boundaries in place to make sure that this is how we're going to communicate. So in a way, I would think that is a form of honoring your parent, just in maybe, I hate to say it, but maybe being the adult in the room in this kind of thing.
Sometimes you have to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I agree. I think that's important, because letting it just devolve into what you see, that too many people, like Ken mentioned and referenced in his message, they overshare and they let too much out, and even in face-to-face, but on social media and different things. And I think you look at it and go, man, I wouldn't do that. But then sometimes if you think back to conversations you had that maybe went a little further than you wish they would, or they went to a degree of being upset or angry that you wished you hadn't let yourself get to. And then if you stop to think before that conversation happened, what did I prepare myself at all? Did I have boundaries, or did I just go into this with all of the stuff on my sleeve, the anger, the scorecard of who did what to win and who and how? And I don't think those ever turn out well.
Well, and I think also if you grew up in a toxic environment, for a lot of people, that is your normal. So you may not even recognize the toxicity of the situation until you're a little bit removed from it.
Yeah.
And so I think educating yourself is really helpful. Talking to a therapist is important. I also think, reading books. My undergraduate degree is in psychology. And so I had a chance to, study a broad range of things. And I read a book called, I think, Emotional Incest. And that is when a parent, speaking of oversharing or trying to rely for emotional support on a child, then there are different kinds of violence that can happen in your life that you may not recognize as violence. So I think educating yourself, but then also coming to a point where you realize, okay, this is what I inherited from my parents. But now I get to make the decision about who I'm going to be and how I'm going to let that affect me. And I think that when you can get to a point where you can tip over into, okay, this is the way that I've been damaged, but now this is what I'm going to do with myself from now on. This is who I'm going to be. This is who I'm not going to be. And making some of those decisions, I think that can be a step in a direction of healing for yourself.
Yeah.
And also that can be a step in the right direction of understanding what kind of healthy boundaries to create.
And I think if you're modeling that as well, that's helpful in the conversation, because clearly if you have parents that are toxic, this isn't something that they're good at. Mm-hmm. And it's not something they're going to do just magically because you wish they would. So if you're modeling it, I think that's also a step in the right direction for future conversations that are going to happen.
I think also for people who have toxic parents, it's important to remember that the commandment does not say obey; it says honor. So it doesn't necessarily, and I think that in a lot of, unhealthy Christian households, there are parents who expect their adult children to obey them, to be at their whim, to do whatever they want, no matter how unhealthy that may be. Children are told to obey their parents, but that's not what the commandment says. I think particularly speaking towards adult children.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Children are to obey their parents, but that word is for young children. It's not talking about older.
And even then it says in the Lord.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it also says fathers don't exasperate your children. Mm-hmm. So I think that's also an important aspect of things to think about. But it could be that honoring looks like choosing not to publicly humiliate a parent who maybe deserve it, to not slander them, say bad things about them, even though they might have it coming, but to choose to be careful about the kind of things you say about that person. That can look like honoring them. It can include praying for them. Saying, I've experienced a lot of hurt. And for me, one of the hardest things to do in life is to pray for the people who have deeply hurt me. I can usually tell where I'm at in my forgiveness journey by how I feel when I pray for somebody who's really wounded me deeply. And so I think that that's kind of part of maybe honoring your parents too, if you find yourself in that situation where you have toxic parents, is to be able to pray for them, pray for their good. Pray that God heals the hurt that's in them. And I think that it can also, honoring is also not allowing them to inflict damage on you or your family, because it's not healthy for them to be hurting others too. And so creating boundaries that keep that from happening, appropriate boundaries, I think is important. I think this is a really tough subject. I think some of the hurt that some children have had to endure at the hands of parents is beyond the comprehension of those of us who haven't had gone through that. So I want to just say to those of you who are listening who may be coming from really, really horrendous backgrounds with parents, that fifth commandment can be a real tough one to read.
Yeah.
And to figure out what that means. And so my encouragement to you is just to keep it in prayer, have grace for yourself as you're trying to process through it. You might be highly benefited from finding a skilled behavioral health specialist to help you work through what needs to happen.
Yeah.
So those are all things. And again, to Melanie's point, I think there is that trend right now to basically treat I feel like any bad behavior by the parent, which again, we're not trying to excuse bad behavior, but any little thing and like, okay, we're done. We're not going to talk about this, or you disagree with me on how to vote, so I don't want to have a relationship with you. And I think that we have to be really careful about that, because we don't have the opportunity to be the salt of the earth if we're not coming in contact with people. We don't have the opportunity to be an influence in people's lives if there's zero contact. And again, I think there is a time and a place for this, so don't mishear me. And I think we have to be very careful that we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater all the time, too.
I also think it's important as you're modeling for your own kids how to interact with your parents. If you model for your kids, or if your parents do something you don't like, you don't talk to them anymore. Basically, you're teaching your kids how to act toward you when they get older and they have their own families and their own, perspectives on life. So
I would say that in that same one, though, how do we feel about when you do that, the talking stops because of boundaries? Right? Like, this was something that was discussed. We set a boundary and the boundary was crossed. And so in some cases, I don't really have anything to say necessarily. Maybe it's a time frame. Maybe it's just, I don't know how to interact with you when you've crossed, especially if it's a large boundary. Like, I don't know what to do or where to go. And that's tricky, because how do you tell your kids and explain that situation that, hey, this is a boundary? You know what I'm saying?
Honestly, I think you tell the truth.
Yeah.
You say, you know what? We love Grandma, but we asked Grandma not to do this, and Grandma did, so we're going to do this now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I'm just saying, I think kids know what's going on more than we give them credit for.
If they don't know the details, they know the feelings.
Well, they know that they're not seeing Grandma and Grandpa, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of pick that up.
They'll figure that out.
So, yeah, these are, again, difficult things. And I think you just, you work through them the best you can. But the more authenticity, and I think the other part is, I think, Randy, it's really important that I think there's some people that will wind up cutting off a parent and never explain to them why it happened.
No, for sure.
I have asked you to not cross this boundary. You crossed it again. We're going to take 3 months off from talking. And at the end of 3 months, let's try to talk again and see if we can not cross that boundary in the future. That's a lot different than just you never pick up the phone and there's no conversation about it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have great hope in the Whole Life family, because I did something this week that I've never done before, prepping for the podcast, and I ran through Gemini the actual sermon.
Oh, boy.
Oh.
And so what happened was an unexpected – I just wanted to know what I wanted a transcript of it just so I could read it. Sometimes
what the
that's
collective
helpful.
Consciousness thinks about Ken's sermon.
Well, no. But this was even better, because what it found was when Ken said, what defines a great biological family? There were plenty of people in the worship center that were giving feedback, and Abel's team has the microphones just right, and everything came through. So I heard from those. I couldn't necessarily make them all out by the ear. I was trying to listen to it. And the audience suggestions, it says here, was diversity, patience, communication, love, teamwork, trust, loyalty, and openness were things that it picked up on. And if you're thinking to yourself, because Ken gave the clinical definition as families where relationships and communication are impaired, impaired. I like that. And members cannot attain closeness or healthy self-expression. And you couple that with the observation that almost every biblical family has been dysfunctional I think who was it? Oh, Ruth and Boaz, maybe not dysfunctional, but complex. So even if you start there and then you go all the way to, the blame game with Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah, Abraham and Sarah, there was David. And then he gets to Joseph and Mary and it was like, pin drop, ding. It's like, wait a minute, Ken. I think you better tread softly because you're talking about Jesus' family now.
Well, the good news is in Adventist theology, we don't believe that Mary was sinless. So I think I'm safe. Now, if I were to become Catholic, I might be in trouble, I suppose. But there's something comforting to me about the fact that Jesus' family was complex.
The last, I'm not sure I caught the whole part, and you went through it, I think, from two different perspectives. With the family intervention at the end from Mark 3:21, believing he had lost his senses. What was it about that gave them the idea that he was losing his senses, or that he somehow needed a family meeting or an intervention or whatever you would want to call that?
I think probably it was what he was teaching and the kind of interaction that he was stirring up with his teaching. I think that they were trying to save him from himself.
So were they not in on who he was either, like anyone else? Is that what we're assuming?
Well,
no, I'm asking. Go ahead, tell me. I'm assuming that, but I'm wondering if when I said we, I was like, so are you assuming what I'm assuming?
So if you even imagine, even if they believed that Jesus was God, have you ever questioned God?
Well, yeah.
So, if this is your kid, even if you were to believe that he was God, that doesn't necessarily preclude you from questioning what
trying to help
the
God
child
out.
is doing.
Yeah. Mary, I would assume. That's a lot of coincidences and like the angel, the whole thing. I would assume that and her knowing that, look,
the Bible
I
is
didn't do
pretty
anything
clear
else.
that the angel told her that she was going to carry the Messiah, basically. But you also have to remember that she was looking through it from her context and her place in history. And the Messiah to her would have been more of a conquering hero who was going to free them from Rome, and a lot less an itinerant rabbi traveling around the country casting out demons and annoying the religious establishment.
I love that phrase. Annoying the religious establishment. That makes me love Jesus more. Thank you. That hits me right in the feels. Let me tell you, that was perfect. So, from all of that, we can ascertain that there is no such thing as a perfect family.
I don't believe so.
And that we have to concentrate on being a great family member. And I was wondering when you said, all right, well, there's really not the idea is there's really not a perfect family. But where are we going if there's not a perfect family? Are we going to go on the, we're between a 90 and 100. So we're going to be an A minus, a B, but just being a great family member.
Well, if there has never, ever, ever been a perfect family that we know of, what is the ideal that we are yearning after?
What is the model?
What is the model that we're
You guys are touching on all the questions.
Oh,
good.
Well, there we go.
Well, then we don't have to do them anymore.
Yeah, you guys are asking
do we
all
want
the
to jump into the questions? Is that what you're saying, Lucas?
No, please keep going.
Oh, no.
I do. So just because there isn't an ideal that we've ever witnessed or seen doesn't mean that there isn't a feeling that there should be, that there should be a family that communicates well, that thinks of each other, that puts each other's needs and wants above the individual. And so for me, it's kind of like maybe it's kind of like the hope of heaven. Everybody I've known, I don't know of anybody that's never died except for Jesus that I'm told about in the Bible.
Technically, Jesus also died.
Well, there we go. So there we go. Yes, technically that's, I guess, so my bad. So let's go with Elijah and Enoch. There we go.
There we go.
So,
Methuselah.
yeah.
Oh, no, Methuselah died.
No, I think-
Never, sorry.
yeah.
Okay,
He was
carry
old,
on.
but I think
He was the
finally
oldest, but-
succumbed.
So, but personally, I've never met them, and the majority of the people in the Bible died. But that doesn't mean that we weren't created for something different. And it doesn't mean that we don't strive for something different. I've never met a perfect person. I've heard about Jesus, but that doesn't mean that we don't strive to be a good person, to be the best person that we can be. And I think the same thing is the point that I would want to make when it comes to families, is that there might not be perfect families, but I do believe there are great families. I do believe that. I do believe that there are families out there that really do things well. Invariably, there's at least one person in that family that doesn't. But that doesn't mean there aren't great families out there. Just maybe not perfect families.
Perfect. So, not necessarily, I mean, perfect would be the ideal, I guess, but can there be a perfect family in our own situation? Like, can we say that, okay, we know that you mentioned if the practical items that Ken gave was acknowledge the reality of your imperfection, be realistic and honest about the existing problems, avoid putting on a show at church. You can't fix what you refuse to acknowledge is broken, and practicing age-appropriate transparency with children regarding personal struggles, life issues. When you put all those things together, is there a point where you say, you know what? We acknowledged that we're not perfect, and yeah, we have problems, and some are small, some are big, some are things we can handle. We're working on all of them, and we're just going to be our transparent selves at church to the best of our ability. And we've acknowledged that there are things that are broken. We've talked to our kids. Is there a level in all of those things? Because I think those are 5 really, really solid things that you really do have to do in order to have any kind of chance to go, I feel like I'm at least putting my best foot forward. I know I'm not perfect. I can't achieve perfection. But is there a perfection in us executing those things, and maybe some others that are maybe applicable that we haven't thought of to our family, where we say, you know what? We kind of are the imperfect perfect family. Is there a stage where you've ever felt in your family like, you know what? We may not be perfect, but we're pretty close to, in all of our failures, in all of our things that we don't do so well that we've identified, but we're all working, and we all see each other working, and we're all consistently putting our best foot forward. I feel like there should be something that says that. I mean, perfect isn't the word.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure about your definition of perfect there.
Right, exactly. So what is the definition? Because I feel like it's either all or nothing. Well, you're not perfect, so keep working. And that feels heavy sometimes when I also see that when everyone is owned their stuff, they're working on themselves, they pray about it, they work about it, we can mention counseling, whether that's professional counseling or you just need someone to walk beside you for a little while, like here with Stephen's Ministers that we have here at Whole Life Church. Whatever the case may be, if everyone is moving in the right direction, I feel like there should be something.
So here's the word, and actually somebody called it out.
Did they?
During church.
Okay.
The symbiosis.
Symbiosis.
Mm-hmm.
So the definition is where we are living organisms that are mutually beneficial. Okay. And is it okay then in that scenario that, you know, Randy has stuff he's working on, Ken has stuff he's working on, and we're all together. And I'm not even saying that this has to be a a family, church family, staff family. We're all doing the things. And I think one of the things that came to mind when Ken was preaching this was one of the rules of engagement we have here as the staff is the rule that we assume good intent. And I think that's part of it. Yeah. And until someone proves that they're not working in good intent, with good intent in their own way as part of the group, then it's assumed that they are, and then there's the grace and everything that follows. So how do you say that? Symbiosis. Maybe I like that word. It's not easy to say. It's not easy to remember, but we're not we're the symbiosis family. We're the symbiotic family, right? Symbiotic, right, would be the right way. Yeah. Because I feel like you can feel like you're pulling the trailer forever and not making any progress.
I think what's implied in there is the movement of living.
Okay.
It's not about achieving some kind of perfect balance. It's about living in harmony to the best of your ability and being beneficial to each other.
And then if we can apply that to our walk, that's even better, because I feel the same tension when it's like, well, sorry, God, I screwed up again. I know, shocker, right? Like you didn't see that one coming. But also it feels like when you don't maybe see enough traction, there's a million ways you can get dragged down in your spiritual walk, just like you can with your family in that relationship. But if there's a way that you can at least take some comfort in the fact that everything that I know how to do, I'm doing to the best that I can. And I feel like there just has to be some kind of, even if it's just a psychological reward for yourself that's like, I can always do better. I realize all these things about myself. But man, I feel like I've come a long way. But you never arrive because that's not available. So if that's not available, what's the next best thing that we can achieve? And maybe
working on yourself.
Okay.
I'm just going to say that it was like this mind blowing moment for me several years ago. Deeply frustrated with a family member, and with some good reasons. And I remember God almost audibly saying to me, "Why don't you just work on yourself, Ken? You are contributing to this. You are contributing to this. I know that you think you're not the main problem, but you're the only part of that equation that you have any chance of changing." And
that's true.
And so one of the things that I am working on very hard, because for me, my natural go-to is let me fix you. Let me tell you how I will make the case for all the things that you need to do that would make everything so much better, and why I'm working really hard and doing my best, and you could do a lot better if you would try. And one of the things I'm really trying to grow in as a human being is to take ownership for myself, have grace for the other, which grace for the other doesn't mean that I tolerate bad behavior, that I'm going to go ahead and let myself be walked all over. But what it does say is I'm a lot more concerned about making myself a better human being than trying to do God's job and make you a better human being. And that doesn't mean that I don't speak up and say, hey, I could use this, I could use that. Yeah. But when they don't choose to do those things, my fallback has always been, and when I'm not at my best, it still is, that I start manipulating and trying to shame and really just manipulate them into doing what I need them to do for me. And so part of my growth process that I'm in is that just, Ken, what is your ability? What's within your reach that you can do? What area do you need to grow in? I was talking in my sermon that I have a counselor that I see once a month, whether I think I need it or not. And, and my counseling meeting was actually yesterday, and was sitting there having my own conversation with my counselor about how to work with boundaries in my life that I'm trying to institute, and that I'm trying to go ahead and create accountability. And instead of expecting everybody else to do it for me and expecting everybody to be happy about it, like, why are you so upset that I'm doing it? Well, it's because I'm changing a pattern that's been going on for years and years and years and years. So of course you're going to be upset because I've changed the rules or what you thought were the rules. And so for me, I think we spend so much time trying to fix other people and get them to be what we need them to be. And fairly so. Everybody deserves to have a spouse that cares about them deeply and is willing to, sacrifice. Everybody deserves to have family, like parents that would give their life for them. And unfortunately, not everybody gets that. As much as we want it, that doesn't always the way that life works out. And so as much as we can try to shame and manipulate those people into being what they ought to be, what they truly ought to be, I'm finding in my own life that my time is better spent figuring out how for me to cope, how for me to be a better person myself. And that's really what I was wanting to get at it in this sermon more than anything, is that the dysfunction in our family is very easy for us to see everybody else's dysfunction. Very, very easy. I am the king of picking out my wife, my kids, my parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts. I'm great at seeing their dysfunction. And I am really, really poor at taking ownership for the dysfunction that I am bringing into the relationship and that I am perpetrating on others. And so that's really where I wanted to go with this sermon, was just say, hey, you can't control other people, but you can control yourself. You do have that option. And when I say you can control yourself, can I just say it can be really hard because if you've developed poor habits of communication, really due to no fault of your own, the house you were raised in just didn't communicate well, so you never saw it modeled, it can be a very, very difficult thing. And I say you have control of yourself. You're like, well, do I? Because I don't even know where to begin. But my point is, what's the next step? You might not be able to hit perfection, but what could you do to move in that direction just an inch or 2 inches to get a little bit better at communicating? What course could you take? What book could you read? What self-reflection could you take time that might help you a little bit more? And what I have found for me is the more I focus on me and the more I try to do the things that I ought to be doing in my life, it seems like the better the relationships around me get. Not all of them, but a lot of them tend to start getting better for me.
So we're going to get to the questions here in just a minute, because I know we have a bunch to get to. But one of the things that I thought about was, in just talking about how do we feel okay with not being perfect, the self-reflection and the self-work that Ken just talked about. What structural or cultural changes need to occur in just local congregations, but let's talk about whole life, so that families feel safe presenting their struggles, their true struggles? So we're not being that inauthentic person. We're not being the person that puts on a show at church. How do we help create a culture where that feels more safe? And do we have more work to do? And I'm guessing the answer is yes.
That's next week.
Is that next week?
Ken's going to explain it all on Saturday.
We do have more work to do, but I think it starts with each and every one of us. I think that one of the reasons why I share that it's a very uncomfortable thing for me to share that I go to a counselor. I don't get up front and say that flippantly, like it's maybe it seems a lot easier from where you sit when you hear me say it. I don't enjoy it, but the reason I do it is because I want to normalize it. And if leaders aren't willing to admit that they're doing it, then then everybody else is like, well, maybe that's not for me. And so I think that for those of us in leadership, there has to be an appropriate amount of self-disclosure that's, again, appropriate, that isn't oversharing. I shared a little bit of what I talked about in my counseling, but I didn't talk about the people that I was struggling with. And I kept. So my point is being very careful that you share what's yours to share and not what's about somebody else. We've all seen, growing up, you've all seen the prayer meetings where somebody comes in and I want to pray for my spouse that they'll do this, and I'll pray for Aunt Nellie who's that. And we all know what's really going on there. It's, it's oversharing something that's not the appropriate thing to do. And so, I don't think that I'm not suggesting that when you're having your massive fight with your kids on the way to church that you need to get out of the car and keep on fighting all through the worship center and into the church. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. But what I would suggest is that we all can at least admit that we're not perfect, that we struggle too. There's something very liberating about knowing that you are not the only one going through whatever struggle you're going through. And not saying that it's okay to go through it, but just not, or that it's okay, but saying that, hey, we're all working on this, or there's a group of us who are working on that. It's why NA and AA work so well. It's because when you get into that room, nobody's well, let me phrase that. When you get into that room, people call it out when people are trying to fake it. I have not spent a lot of time in those meetings. I've spent some, but my brother, who has spent a fair amount of time, just says, Ken, when you have gone through some of these things, when you look at somebody else that they're not okay because they're saying what you said at one point, and you call it out, and not to judge the person, but to say, hey, if it's going to get fixed, you gotta admit what it is. Yeah. So I think what would be helpful in churches is if we didn't act shocked when people aren't perfect. And when somebody comes in and says, I'm really hurting because X, Y, and Z, that we were like, oh, wow, I can't believe that. Your family, really? I would never have thought that. And right. That right there stifles any further conversations. Like, I guess I'm not safe here to share what I'm needing somebody to support me in, because when I do, you're going to make me feel like
I don't need the disappointment as the first thing that comes out of your mouth. Yeah, that's really good. And I think that I hope that people feel that there's an idea here that, everyone is welcome and everyone should feel safe. I know probably not everyone does, but I hope that, the longer we're all together and the longer we're doing this, that somehow we can get better with just being okay to say, even if there's no details, like you said, not to overshare or just throw up details on people that shouldn't be said, but to be able to say that I'm not okay and then have someone that can listen. And again, I know we have things here in place, but
learn how to pass the flinch test.
Yeah, learn
how to pass the flinch test. When somebody comes up to you and says something that you can't believe, learn how to keep that face in an empathetic place without like I pity you and without I judge you.
Yeah.
Learn how to do that. It's a skill that you have to work on.
Because the person sharing will pick it up.
Yeah,
immediately.
Immediately. We've all gone in front of somebody and shared something, and they didn't say anything, but you immediately their body tenses up, or it's like, oh, I don't know that we should be talking about that. Well,
if not here, where?
All right. Well, then I'll move on.
Yeah. No, that's true. All right, Lucas, what do we have for questions? And if there's something that we've totally gone over, let's
I think in some levels you answer all of them.
Well, let's hear the questions and we'll check them off as we go.
If the first family and so many others so close to God's perfection can be so dysfunctional, is there any hope for us? I know that our hope is in the Lord, but the day-to-day is hard.
Oof. Amen. Amen, it is. And for me, it's the exact same thing as understanding that Christ was sinless and that I'm called to be like Christ. That feels pretty impossible. And yet it's something I want to strive towards. I long to be the kind of person that Jesus was. And so the same thing is true when it comes to my family. I think it's hard. I don't know whether it'll be attained on this side of heaven, and yet I strive towards the goal, as Paul would say.
I think if that is your goal, though, That's a step in the right direction too, because you can let yourself just mire in it and go, well, that ain't going to happen. So why even, I think immediately your level of commitment to that goes way down. So just even keeping do we have hope? Yeah. The hope is we can become better and, do the work on ourselves, and any little progress, it when it happens, and it feels good when it's like, hey, that's because I did some work on myself, and you can see that result. So hopefully that's some of the hope right there.
When you talk about boundaries, how can I distinguish between setting healthy boundaries versus rejecting a family member who is toxic because their behavior hurts me?
One thing there are a couple things I say to this. Number one, I am not a psychologist or a therapist in any way, shape, or form. So I want to start off by saying that. So my encouragement to you would be to read some books on boundaries and what healthy boundaries are. And I know that that's going to take longer than me giving you a 30-second clip, but I think it will actually help you further in the long run.
Yeah.
And if you have a counselor or you have an inclination to get one, they are also excellent at helping you figure that out. And the reason I'm a little shy to answer this one is because we're not on the same page of defining what toxic is. Mm-hmm. In a therapy session, if you sit down with a therapist, they're going to hear the details of what's going on. They're going to be able to get the nuance of things, and what you define as toxic, I might define as super toxic, or I might think, well, maybe it's not quite as bad as it's feeling.
Yeah,
and so. Again, to my point, I would just really encourage, when it comes to boundaries, read up on it, spend some time in it, and then also work those things through with a trained therapist who can really help you with that.
Yep.
Why does the Bible include so many deeply dysfunctional families, and what do their stories teach us about how God works through broken family systems without necessarily approving of the dysfunction?
Boy, it teaches us that God's grace is big, doesn't it?
I was just going to say.
When you really truly look at who Abraham was, when you truly look at who Noah was, when you truly look at who David was, God's grace is deep and wide. It really is. And that's one of the reasons I think that the Bible includes it, because we live in a world that is vastly imperfect. And the vast majority of people don't live in bliss, and and so I think the Bible comes along and says, "Hey, you're not abnormal. You're not some strange freak that God doesn't like. Look at these people. There's so. I mean,
yeah.
If God could love them, then surely God can love me. And if God can use them, surely God can use me. And so that's why I think the Bible includes so many of those stories, is because they tend to be the human story.
Does the Bible always require reconciliation with a dysfunctional family member, or are there situations where creating distance is actually the more biblical and loving choice?
So I've come to believe that the Bible requires forgiveness, but not necessarily reconciliation.
Yeah.
I believe that you are required to forgive. And for me, forgiveness is giving up your right to get even. It's
that's a good way to put it.
And so I do believe that is a biblical requirement. Jesus talks about it. But what I don't see, what I think you're required to forgive, and I think you're required to be open to the idea of reconciliation in the right circumstances. Part of that, what we see, look at God. He holds people accountable, and until they, he puts Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden. There's that whole thing where he allows Babylon to overthrow Judah. There are consequences, and God seems to always be open to the idea of reconciliation with us. when we want that reconciliation. But I think a lot of times unhealthy Christians require of others to forgive them when they have no intention of changing their behavior.
Yeah.
And I think that's problematic.
Yeah.
Problematic in the sense of I don't believe that God expects us to reconcile with somebody who intends harm to us, to be in that kind of relationship. I do think God needs us to forgive them. I think God needs us to be open to if they came and said, I have messed up very badly, and I am so sorry, and I am willing to take the consequences, because our relationship matters that much. And part of that may be that you are never ready to be around me very much because of the deep hurt that I inflicted on you.
Yeah.
But I want you to know, I think that at that point, we that's where the forgiveness part comes in. But I do think there's some situations where just on this earth, I'm just not sure that reconciliation is going to be healthy for anybody. You can think of some of the deepest kinds of hurt out there that can be inflicted on a person, and I'm just not sure that God expects somebody who's had some of the heinous things that can happen in this world, even if the other person's truly sorry, is changing their ways. It is hard to look at that person who has been abusive beyond the realm of in unspeakable ways. You think about people who have anyway, you think about the worst things that you can think of, and I'm not sure that God expects us to be best friends. Now, we have stories about people who do find that kind of reconciliation, and they're willing, that God gives them that ability. But I think we need to be careful of judging people who are deeply wounded and are like, hey, I'll forgive you. But I just don't think that being in a relationship is what I'm capable of this moment. And I'll pray that if God can change my heart, that He will. But right now, it's just not there.
Well, and think about it from that other person's perspective too. Someone that is doing all the things, they genuinely ask for forgiveness. Yeah. They do make changes. You see them on the right path. Sometimes that hurts even more because you're like, where was this person?
Yeah.
Before you did whatever you did to me?
Yeah.
That can make it even harder to go any further after that.
Well, if you physically stab someone, it's unrealistic to think that the scar is going to go away because you said you were sorry. And it's equally unrealistic to think that you can emotionally stab somebody
and not have that,
and think that there's not going to be a scar that hurts.
For sure. All right.
How do you have a conversation with parents who generally did a good job, but when you bring up anything that was less than ideal and has created adult challenges, they immediately say they do not remember that event happening, or remember it, but challenge the details of the event? And then they decide that bringing this up is equivalent to ingratitude and thus no acknowledgement of the hurt it caused. It feels like to keep the peace, I must ignore some hard things.
That sounds like boundaries.
Yeah. And that's a hard one because, you started off by saying parents who did a generally good job.
Yeah.
But they aren't willing to own that. And, if that isn't your parents, then you know somebody who has parents like that.
Yeah.
And that's a hard one because how helpful would it be as a parent to say, hey, I don't remember that, but if that's what you remember, tell me more. Tell me what I need to do to I would never want to hurt you that way. And I think as a parent who's now has adult children, I'm probably feeling a little bit more understanding towards, like, I do not remember that happening. I really don't. Or I do remember it, but I remember it in very different circumstances. I don't feel like you saw the semi truck that was headed towards you when I shoved you.
Yeah.
And so, yes, from your perspective, I just out of nowhere shoved you for no reason, but you were staying in the middle of the road and there was a semi coming that you didn't see because you're small. And so it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky because then there's the other side of where there are parents that just shove their kid for no reason and then they blot it out and it just never happened. And maybe that's part of it as a parent is to say, this is the way I remember it. Tell me how you remembered it.
Yeah.
And in my own life, again, going back to the catchphrase of this sermon, I cannot control the way my parents handle things and what they're going to do. And at some point, I have to decide for myself whether I just need to let it go because they're not going to see it, or they don't want to talk about it. They're not open to it. Do I let it go? Or is it such a big deal for me to find healing to do that I really do need to confront it? And then if there's an unwillingness at that point, then I need to create whatever boundaries need to be created. Again, this comes down to having specific details and being with somebody who's skilled in this area, a therapist who can kind of work through some of these things. But there are times where, you just have to let it go. It's not a big enough deal to make it a big deal. You're just like, okay, that's not the way I remember it. You remember it differently than I do. I want you to be aware of it because we should be able to talk about it. But what I would say to those of us in the older parenting bracket, as our children get older, I would just encourage us all to at least to listen. And if it isn't the way that you remember it, understand that is the way that your child remembers it. And if that's the way that they're remembering it, that is their reality. So how do I go ahead and work through that? I'm not saying that you need to say sorry for something that you didn't do. On the other hand, how do you make your child know that you care, that you're glad that they brought it up, that you would rather have them bring it up than not? Because open communication is always the best kind of communication. And so thank you for bringing this up. It's not the way I remember it, but tell me how you remember it. Tell me what emotions that's making you feel. Is that creating distance between us? What could I do? Hearing what you've said, what could I do to make it right for you? And sometimes all a child wants to do is be heard. Hey, this really hurt me a lot. And well, I am really sorry.
That they want the confirmation with the look in your eyes that says, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. And even though I don't understand it because I don't remember it that way, man, I can be sorry that that's how it came across or whatever. But that confirmation.
But if you're like me, you start getting defensive. I would never hurt your feeling. I would never want to do that to you. How could you even think that? I mean, I've sacrificed so much for you. And we all have that inside of us to a certain extent, or maybe not all of us. I know I do. And so my challenge in life is to shut off the problem solver, the defense attorney in me, and turn on the pastoral listener in me and say, okay, let me listen to you and really hear you out and not be defensive about it.
Taking the high road. The perfect parent, God, didn't even have a perfect family. Lucifer and the fallen angels. So what is the point of creating a family if statistically speaking, there will still be dysfunction?
Well, I guess it's the question of, do you want an AI family or do you want a real family?
So are we going to have AI families in heaven?
I don't think so. But I think that in heaven,
Lucas is disappointed.
No.
He's like, AI family.
In your face, GPT.
I think heaven is part of this. I think it's, for me, heaven is a collection of people who've decided that sin and its pain aren't worth it. And they're not giving up their free will, but they've chosen to go ahead and live in selflessness and to allow God to create that in them. That's for me it. But if you only surround yourself with people who are incapable of ever disappointing you, then you're really working with robots who are pre-programmed and don't have self-will.
What are you going to do about yourself? I disappoint myself all the time. So I can't. I mean,
time to become an AI.
I know. What are my choices? The other thing I would just quickly add is I used to think differently about certain aspects of my parents, and spoke very negatively to a family member about it a long time ago. And it took someone who basically had to sit me down and shut me up and really give me the once over and like, you'd have no idea what you're talking about. Here's what you don't know. And then when you find out certain things about the way your parents were raised and the things that they had, and then and again, I wouldn't say this, it doesn't erase behaviors, it doesn't erase things that had happened, it doesn't excuse behaviors. But I think if you're going to find a place, if the idea of I would like to understand so that I can work on myself, I can better interact with you, the more information you have that way, and if there is someone that's willing to talk to you about it and be straight, and this person was very straight with me, and I think I was 9 or 10, and they worked me over really, really. And it's still, I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. And it's one thing as I became a parent that said, man, this is how I want to be. And again, not oversharing at the wrong time when it's too young to whatever. But man, having a different perspective from people that intimately know your parents or maybe other family members and what they were going through at certain times in their lives makes a whole lot of difference. At least for me, it does, because I can start seeing where those issues and how much they overcame to be what you can say, oh man, that I didn't like this, or I disagree with that. And maybe it was bad, but I also feel like it gives them context. And then you can see yourself where you say, oh man, I wish I did this better. I did this, but I'm not perfect either. They're on the same trajectory, or they were in this. So I think getting information can be super, super helpful if you have access to it.
Very much so.
All right. Any more questions?
Nope.
That's it. Man, guys, you had great questions this week. There was a lot of interaction during the message, and as always, I would encourage you every week, join us if you're here local. Of course, come and visit, and we'd love to see you here at Whole Life. And of course, we stream every week at 9:30 a.m. and 12 p.m. You can stop by that. Speaking of grace, catch the message. If you've missed it, take it with you on your way. And as always, like this week, love the questions. It really brings it the idea of the message and behind it, and we're able to share with you our personal experiences, and you're able to share yours, and that makes it even more meaningful. So next week we will do this all again, but it's great families so if it's not dysfunctional families, tell me this is
church family.
Dysfunctional churches. Yes, that's what we're going to be talking about it.
all
so
right.
I've got some things we need to talk about. So, no.
Dad's in the house. Watch out.
No, this next
Who
week
left the
we're
lights on again?
We're going to talk about realistic expectations for church family.
Excellent. I like the sounds of that. All right. Well, anything else that we need to talk about?
Yeah, I think that people should be prepared for the
That's
worship
right.
center.
That
to
was
look
the
a
one I
little
was hoping
different
for.
when they
Why
walk
is it
in.
going to be different, Melanie? Tell us a little more.
Because we are going to have living room church.
That's the one. Oh,
and then in the
man.
evening, we're going to have a living room sessions concert, which is one of the best concerts of the year, I think.
It's a fun one.
It's a lot of fun. But we figured we're talking about families. Let's set up the living room.
So this is a physical arrangement that you haven't seen before.
You have not seen this before.
I like
not
it.
in this way.
Oh,
no.
it's...
Ken's
we love to keep you guessing here at Whole Life. And,
So is this like Ken on the Hysteria tour where it was in the round in your face? Ken's going to be in the center, and he's going to have to keep turning around and finding different camera angles. What are we doing?
Yeah, we're actually just putting him on this little wheel that just spins him around and around.
I like it.
Yeah.
Actually, we may not. I mean, I don't.
There's a song for
We
that.
don't actually have one of those, but that would be cool.
Well, Jack Facundus told me he was just on a tour of old churches, and he saw the ones that had the pulpit that takes stairs to get up to, and that you're preaching. So I say, Melanie, between now and Sabbath, you invest in a hanging pulpit from the top there that everybody can just look up at.
You want me to suspend you from the ceiling.
I was hoping we could start with him at the top.
That sounds like a lot of trust.
And then have him so that at what 25 minutes, we're landing on the floor with everybody else.
Oh, you know what? That would be a good way to make sure you know where I was at in the sermon. I start up really high and I just lower, and at the end of 25 minutes, my feet are touching the ground. I have to stop.
Oh, speaking of 25 minutes.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
What did I do?
Let's talk about
do you know how long you preached this last week?
First service, I was done right on time.
Yes, and you know how many minutes I put on the clock for you?
Tell me.
30.
Why did you do that?
Because you were including some of the Q&A in the sermon, but you got all the way to the end, and then you talked for 3 more minutes, and then we did Q&A. So we were well into the 35-ish range this week.
It felt good, didn't it, Ken?
Cut her mic.
That's it. You're done. We're cutting you off.
I figured I had to get at least one in since I should be in a body cast for the number of times I got thrown under the bus last week. I knew I needed to listen to the podcast when everybody said, you don't need to listen to the podcast.
That's how much content Ken has. And you keep cutting in the middle of the season, you know?
Yeah, his graphic designer knows exactly what he has for content every week. And so, it's like,
There's so much I leave on the floor.
I know. That's tragic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, join this tragedy one more week. Next Wednesday.
Only one more.
One more week. Join this tragedy, and we'll see you all again next week. Thanks for listening, guys, and have a fantastic week. Thanks for listening to This Is Whole Life. If today's conversation resonated with you, we invite you to subscribe, share, and leave a review on your favorite listening platform. To join the conversation, send a text or voicemail to 407-965-1607 or email podcast@wholelife.church. To learn more about Whole Life Church, worship with us online or in person, visit our website, wholelife.church. Until next time, this is Whole Life.
I'll let you edit this in wherever you want, Randy.
Oh, good.
Just, I feel like we have to mention that a national treasure was lost today.
Oh, we forgot. Oh, Dolly.
Dolly Parton passed away. We were recording this on Tuesday, August 25, and we just saw the news before we came in here that Dolly passed away. So I personally, growing up over in Appalachia on the western side of North Carolina, just have a ton of respect for Dolly Parton, what she did in her life and the difference she made. Not just musically, but with people. She just loved people. And if you were anywhere around Dolly, you just know how much she took of her personal money to invest in her community and to create jobs and to help create a better place wherever she went. And so I just want to say it's just worth remembering, doing that shout out to her and her family. Thank you for sharing her with us, and our prayers are with you as you grieve her loss.
Yeah.
From humble beginnings.
Because I'm sure Dolly's family is listening to this podcast, but
never know.
You never know. But anyway,
if you happen to know Dolly's family, please share it with them. How about that? Because there's
truly a national treasure.
Absolutely.